Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Horse's Mouth Live, the Extraordinary Advisor Show. My name is Ellen Rogin, and as always, I have great guests who are experts in our field or related fields to provide you with information to help you in every area of your life, especially your business. And we have a real true expert in our industry who I'll give you a formal introduction in a little bit. But when I actually found Julie on LinkedIn, because I thought her post was so interesting and thought, oh, wow, I hope we could get her for the show. And Julie's really an expert in how do we, more than just have our clients satisfied, how do we get them engaged? She's done all sorts of thought leadership in the industry around engagement and working with advisors and big financial services firms. So before we dig in, let me give you Julie's formal bio. And Julie Littlechild is the founder and CEO of Absolute Engagement. It's a firm that provides innovative technology tools and guidance to help advisors and advisory firms use input from clients to really drive profound engagement and significant growth. She's worked with and studied successful financial advisors and their clients for more than 20 years. She conducts one of the largest investor research studies that examines what clients need, what they want, and what they expect. And it's not always what advisors assume they need, or if you've been in business a long time, maybe you really would benefit from knowing how things have changed. And we're going to talk about that today. She's an author of a very popular blog, co-host of her podcast, Becoming Referable, great title, and the author of The Pursuit of Absolute Engagement. Welcome, Julie. Thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, and I loved, in our conversation when we first met each other and then before we started the show today, really love the distinction you make with this idea of going from just having our clients be satisfied, like client satisfaction surveys, to really having them engaged. And isn't just like satisfaction or above satisfaction a good enough thing for advisors to be thinking about?
Yeah, I always feel like I'm congratulating the industry for doing so well on satisfaction and then saying, sorry, it's not enough, because it is a high standard. And you're right. And I think, to some extent, I always want to pause and reflect and celebrate the fact that as an industry, we're doing well on satisfaction. And it's not easy. I don't want to suggest it's not easy to achieve. The reality is, though, in our industry, satisfaction levels are extremely high. And that's a good thing. But it also means it's not going to set you apart. It's not going to differentiate you. So if the goal is to really have deeper connection, to differentiate yourself, to have maybe more profound relationships with your clients, then I think we need to set the bar a little higher, or at least we need a different standard. And that's why we tend to start focusing on engagement, and what does that look like, and what does it mean? So high fives all around for high satisfaction, but there's more to consider.
So interesting. You're talking about connection and profound relationships. Why is that actually important to growing your business? I mean, wouldn't it be like really giving good service or helping your clients reach their goals? Or, is it that big of a differentiator because the bar's low? Or talk a little bit more about that distinction there.
Yeah, there are big differences, I think, when clients are looking for an advisor, for example, they're going to start looking for things that are beyond just satisfaction. I think if you held a shingle out and said, we're effectively as good as everyone else, it's not going to be the most compelling message to send. But really, when you start getting under the surface of engagement and some of the associated concepts like leadership, and we can talk a little bit about that, there are some real benefits to that as well. First and foremost for the client, right? So clients who are more deeply engaged generally have higher levels of self-confidence in their own financial future, feel greater peace of mind, feel more in control. There are a whole list of things that are associated with clients, and that should be enough. But from an advisory point of view, the reality is it's also very connected to referral activity. And so there's clients who are engaged are much more likely to provide referrals to a business. So, it's got both sides.
That's really interesting that when they're engaged, they feel a deeper sense of peace of mind. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think to some extent it's because of what's driving the engagement. So I think advisors who are focused on engagement are going deeper into what's on the minds of their clients, their needs and challenges and aspirations. It's not just about the money. It's not just about good service. They're just going deeper. And when that happens, you are creating a much more profound connection, I think, to your clients. And so that's why I believe it to be connected to how you feel. If your advisor is playing that role of guide and leader and helping you think through your financial future, helping you craft a vision, perhaps for a financial future that is more than what you planned, even inspiring you maybe to think differently. Well, that's pretty deep. And that's why I think we see all of those other outcomes for clients.
So interesting that you're talking about leadership with your clients. I know that advisors who have teams think about the fact they're a leader for their teams. Yeah. But what do you mean by actually being a leader for your clients?
So that word actually came out of a lot of the research that we do. So every year we go out and we do an industry-wide study of investors. We do it in Canada, we do it in the US, and occasionally the UK as well. And over the years, we've developed some frameworks for client experience that really comes out of all of that data. One of those frameworks is what you were talking about earlier, this path from satisfaction to engagement. And when we looked at the data, what we could see is quite clearly that, good service was foundational. It's table stakes, but it's foundational. You're going to dissatisfy pretty quickly if you don't get that right. But as we moved up from satisfaction to engagement, the next level was kind of the offer. Was the offer, by way of example, there tends to be a connection between engagement and financial planning or comprehensive financial planning. So, is the offer right? Is it appropriate? Is it, is there perhaps expertise that is unique to that target group? Whatever, it's about offer. But at the top of the pyramid, we labeled it leadership because it was the only word we could think of. And it really reflected a qualitatively different relationship. It was about understanding those needs and challenges and concerns and aspirations. And it was responding to those things through conversation or through communication. I remember one year we asked clients, investors across the country, do you see your advisor as a leader? This is where it started. I didn't even define it. I just sort of threw it out there. And there was this really tight connection between a yes on that, a leadership, and engagement. I thought, okay, that's interesting. So next year we said, well, what does it mean to you? What does leadership mean to you? And the three words really, one dominating, it was about expertise. It was about being proactive, but the single most used term, unaided, was guidance. So it's like, grabbing your clients by the hand and just sort of leading them through their financial lives. That to me is leadership. And that's what we saw in the data.
That's so interesting. So when you're working with advisors, are there kind of how-tos? How do you actually do that? Or is it a mindset like, oh, I know I can't just talk about rates of return. I have to go deeper?
I think it's both. I do think there is, for many advisors, a natural mindset to do that, right? To have those conversations. But I think that as we think about how the experience needs to evolve, at least a differentiated experience, then I think we need to look for ways to operationalize that as well. And so that could be, it could be sharing communications that focus on the key concerns that your clients express. It could be writing blog posts or sharing articles or doing a podcast, but related to the issues that your clients are dealing with. To me, that's a tangible way of demonstrating leadership. It could be ensuring that review meetings are hyper focused on what the client needs to talk about, not what the advisor needs to talk about, which I think we all, are guilty of sometimes. But, again, to me, that's another form of leadership. And it's very tangible in that sense.
Do you get advisors teams involved in this so that the whole team is having this kind of communication or that leads to deeper engagement?
Yeah, I mean, I think the team can be involved in the overall communications plan, in how they present the team and what's important. Yeah, so I think there's elements that is really about the advisor in that one-on-one conversation, and there's leadership reflected in the entire experience that's presented. So yeah, I think there's a lot the team can do for sure.
So how have you seen things change since COVID, since there's a lot more of virtual happening, there's different concerns people have? What have you seen?
Oh gosh, so much. Uh, I mean, one thing that I sort of observed, if we think about that framework of, service offer leadership, right? So one thing that absolutely happened with the pandemic is it almost forced us down to the base of that, right? Like we had no choice. We had to figure out how to meet with people. And Zoom and digital signatures and all of that stuff. And as much as that changed, the problem is it's still foundational, right? You're actually not setting yourself apart by having Zoom meetings because there's a pandemic, right? I mean, everybody had to do it, but it was necessary. We had no choice but to react in a way. And so now I think one of the opportunities that opens up, now that we've figured out a few things at least, is to think about, well, what does leadership look like now? Right, in the face of what we've all experienced. And we have seen a shift in things clients are concerned about, right? So health and wellness and managing stress, and many of these things are rising to the top for a lot of clients and their concerns. So now I'm seeing, well, to me, that's an opportunity to support clients. It doesn't mean you have to, run an aerobics class for them, but maybe, it's sharing content or what have you that helps them deal with many of those concerns they've got. So I feel like we're at a crossroads now, right? We've had to figure out the basics, and we'd like to think that was enough, but it's not. So now, what's that experience going to look like going forward? And how are we really going to transition to support clients now?
Julie, do you see there's things, the distinction between what advisors do? So maybe it's their process. We now do planning. We go deeper in that. We have a different kind of discovery process, and kind of who advisors are, like how they are being with their client. Is that a distinction you guys look at, or is it really about we go from service to engagement by doing these things in the process?
And so are you saying, is there a difference between the process and the mindset, or maybe you can help me there?
Yeah. Someone could have a really great, deep, meaningful financial advisory practice. Mm-hmm. And then there's advisors that are super empathetic, that are really great listeners, that are able to have a deeper kind of communication with clients.
Right.
So I'm curious if you see one's more important than others, right, or people aren't comfortable with one part of that. I'm just interested.
I think, there are people who aren't comfortable with one part of that part being the deeper conversation for clarity. I don't know that everybody has to be. The reality is clients are looking for different things. You just need to be the person your clients need you to be. I think the danger zone is when we're one way and our clients actually need something else. Right? That's a problem. But I do think that there is a lot that we can do with process. And how do we craft the meeting agenda to ensure it covers what's important? How do we communicate? How do we design, workflows that really reflect what's on the minds of our clients? All of these things are part of a great experience. It's not as touchy-feely as some of the other things, although I think we got to get comfortable with that too.
So will you share some stories of how an advisor may have shifted this, or some success stories when they've shifted from really great client service to deep engagement as a different focus for their practice?
Yeah, there's some wonderful examples out there, I think, of firms like, and there's such a range, right? There's things that the big behemoth firms are able to do because they've got the resources. And then there's tweaks that maybe the smaller firms can do to help enhance the process where resources aren't as plentiful. But I mentioned content. I mean, to me, that's the most simple and obvious one we've seen. Now, our lives are about gathering input and using input. So my tendency is to think about those examples because it's what we see day in and day out. But we've worked with firms who said, we want to add significant value to our clients, who've gathered input on what clients are interested in or concerned about right now, and then became hyper personalized in their communication. And so what I mean by that is being able to say, hey, John Smith, you told me you were worried about stress right now. I found this great TED talk on managing stress that I really thought you'd find of interest. Right. So it's hyper personalized in that it reflects an individual client. But the reality is, of course, there were many clients who were experiencing those same challenges. So to me, that's an example of going from we contact and communicate with our clients enough with generic content, right? The stuff that no one will be offended by, but nor will they ever share it or feel, they're not going to be talking at the dinner table about the market update or what have you. And so, to me, that's an example that we're seeing many advisors thinking about now and shifting to that more personalized kind of communication. I think we are increasingly seeing advisors focus on a particular niche or a target audience. And to me, that is also, it supports a deeper experience because it gives you much more latitude to customize the experience. So we're absolutely seeing firms who are saying, look, we're going to have resources or events that are targeted at business owners or what have you. Not always easy for advisors to do. I appreciate that's a kind of a big step. The one example though that comes to mind, and this relates to just how a review is changing, and we have some research on that as well. I'm happy to talk about, but we've observed, I suppose, that even the greatest advisors, right, are designing wonderful workflows around things like their review meetings. So here's how often we'll meet, here's the trigger, here's the workflow, here's the agenda, and it's a beautiful thing. The problem with it is it wasn't always a reflection of what was on the mind of the client, and they weren't always going deep enough. And so of late, we've been working with a number of firms on putting a process in place to invite input as part of that review agenda. So co-creating the review agenda based on what's on the mind of the client right now, not 6 months ago, not 6 months right now, but what are they talking about? And bringing couples together to share some of those concerns and needs and interests, and using that to drive the conversation. And to me, that's it's not a nuanced difference. It's quite a substantial difference. And we're seeing really interesting results in terms of how deep those conversations are going and how good clients feel about those. So, I mean, it's such a range of example, but it's among the many things that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, that's interesting about co-creating agendas. And that's something that I, in a different way, teach when I'm working with people about communication. And
Right.
How do you get clients to not be spinning in their head because they're thinking about what they want, and just
Yes.
you said you've got your agenda. So is that something that you recommend happens before they get in? Like, hey, we're designing the agenda, or while they're sitting there, there's a co-creation that happens?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think either is better than nothing, right? I mean, that's much better than here's what I want to talk about. But what we did observe is, and I can relate to this as a client, that if I sit down with my advisor and it's okay, before we start, tell me, what do you want to focus on? I'm like a deer in the headlight. I don't know. What do you have written down there? Because I think that's what we're focusing on. When we ask in advance, I think we're just giving human beings time to think it through, maybe subconsciously to talk to their spouse, to come prepared, even though it doesn't feel like work. And we found that that's had a more profound impact on the conversation.
That makes sense. And probably opens it up like, hey, we thought we were going to talk about, us wanting to maybe start a business, but we're realizing what's really up right now is that, Joe's mom just got sick and we realized she doesn't have enough money or whatever that is.
Exactly. And I think, it's important to the client, but I also think that as human beings, if we've got something else taking up our brain space, we can't even hear what you're saying, right? We can't hear the advice. So part of this process may just be helping them clear the decks a little, helping them articulate what they're even feeling, maybe saying, look, we can come back to that, or there's some solutions. And then they're open to the conversation instead of being somewhere else during the entire thing.
We had a guest on a couple of times, really at the start of COVID, Marcia Martin, who's actually been do you know who she is? She's been the trainer. Yeah, she's been the trainer for like Tony Robbins, and Harv Eker, and she actually said the exact same thing. People come in and they're full and they can't hear you till you help them empty some of that out of their minds.
Absolutely. And label it sometimes, right? Sometimes it's just a feeling that we need to say, oh, okay. Oh, I see. That's what that is. And now that I've labeled it, I can put it in a context of maybe it's not for now, but it was on my mind.
Yeah. Beautiful. Are there any suggestions that you have in terms of how it's different, whether you're on camera or in person, or is it still the same kind of conversation?
Ultimately, I think it's the same kind of conversation, but it's an interesting question to me because I know I'm hearing, I'm sure you are, a lot of, I can't connect as well, or maybe I can't connect with prospects, but it's okay with clients. In my mind, if the conversation is the right conversation, you're going to connect. Beyond obvious things like, don't look down here and, all that kind of like, do look at your clients. So there might be some new skill sets. But I tell you what, when we did our most recent investor research, we did ask a lot of questions on virtual meetings. And I tend not to get too surprised by data, but I was even surprised by the fact that about 3/4 of clients were saying they can have discussions that are as good and sometimes better virtually than in person. And so to me, the data just washed away this concern that it's impossible, and maybe highlights the fact that maybe we want to get back to in person. Maybe it's not our clients at all. But at a minimum, I think that, about half of clients are saying they want to get back to in person right now. This is all very fluid, but that means half either don't care or they prefer virtual. And in my mind, I think that's going to force us to think about, well, is that virtual meeting as good, as extraordinary as the in-person? Is it not just something I'm doing because I have to, because it's a COVID thing, right? But now it's a hybrid solution, and one can't be second best. So I think I'm interested to see how advisors embrace this and, make these meetings more interactive. But I've always thought, I can talk to you and feel like we're connecting. That maybe it's just me.
Or me. Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah. And I think that there, to your point about curiosity, how they're going to make it more engaging, you have to. It is going to be a hybrid situation. Yeah. I still have people calling me looking for referrals to advisors. And I always ask them, do you care where they're located? And no one has said yes.
Is that right? You've seen a real shift.
Oh my gosh. It used to be, no, I want to be able to, it'd be cool. They'd like to meet them in person at some point, but they don't really care where in the country they are anymore. And so it's added more of the reason, in my viewpoint, to have things like engagement. So it is differentiated, because it's not just the advisors in your local area. And also getting, even more comfortable or skilled, or appreciating that it is going to be a hybrid solution going forward.
Yeah, and I wonder as well if that will heighten the use of things like video or whatnot. So if we've never met and you're a client, I'm sure we all have clients we've never met in person, maybe I'm going to record something that says, hey, by the way, this is, my team or my office or something quirky, or just, it feels like we're going to be looking for all those ways to connect more personally. I tend to think that will impact social media as well. I think we're seeing it creep up in terms of importance. There's such a huge age differential on that, but I think we were all looking for ways to connect and feel part of, have some community in our lives. And so, to me, these tools that we might have treated as peripheral until now may start to become more and more important going forward.
Yeah. So I know this is part of your business, Julie, but do you recommend that advisors do client surveys on a regular basis to take the pulse of what's going on? Or it's just important for some of the bigger firms and it can be more informal with smaller firms?
I think it's important to have some process for every firm. The way that gets manifested is very different for a large firm versus an individual advisor, for sure. In no small part because what we see in the research is clients tell us it's important. When we look at the most engaged clients, about 72% of them are saying that asking for my input is a way to demonstrate that my advisor is committed to the relationship. So, I think that's important. I do think there's a point of difference though, because as soon as we talk about this, there's these two forms of feedback or input, and they're really quite different. We think of feedback as measuring how you're doing. It's where we started, right? Are clients satisfied? And I do think it's helpful to have an ongoing pulse on that, just to know if anything's changing, but more importantly, I think it's important to get input. And by that, I mean input on how are clients feeling? What do they need? How are their needs evolving? What are their preferences? We've got to be doing that now because we know it's changed. But going forward, I think, so less about how am I doing and a little bit more about how are you doing? And that can ensure that all of these things we're talking about, you actually have some data to base it on. And it's not just assumption, which is unfortunately the most common way we do this.
Yeah, great. I love that. I love the deep looking at what would have people feel more engaged, what's important to them. It's maybe visually moving around to the other side of the table with your client.
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely.
Yeah. This is fabulous, Julie. I know you put out great information. I'm on your mailing list. If people want to find out more about your services or start following you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, everything's on the site at absoluteengagement.com. We do have a blog where, we publish weekly, and it's all of the research, it's all of the thinking. So that tends to be our single best resource if you just want to stay abreast of what we're seeing, and we're happy to share that as much as we can. So that's just right off the website as well.
Good. Well, I encourage all of you to go out there and check out Absolute Engagement and what Julie's up to. It will absolutely help in your practice. And Julie, thank you. Having an expert like you in our on our show and sharing your wisdom with our community. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It was great.
And for all of you out there watching and listening, thank you. My name is Ellen Rogin, and please connect with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear what you're interested in learning more about. And if you're interested in learning more about what it takes, like what extraordinary advisors know that others don't, you can download my special report at ellenrogin.com/horse's mouth. And until next time, the question to ponder is, how deep of an impact are you wanting to make with your clients, and how engaged are you willing to be? Remember, be great and create great every single day.